Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon, dear viewers. Thank you for always taking the time to be with us every Saturday afternoon. The show is Islam Now. We want to look at the truth about Islam, and considering the time of the year, we first focus on what has happened here, and then we go to our main issue, which is the truth about Islam. We look at the events in the world, both in the history, in the historical aspect, and the contemporary events, and we look at their bearing on Islam, what Islam has to say about them, and whether it's the truth or whether it is not. And in that regard, we decided to sort of reshift our focus to looking at countries in particular. We look at a country that has had events in a week. We establish the country. How did it start? Where is the country? What is the Muslim population in that particular country? And what is happening there? What has happened there in the week that we are discussing? Whether it is something Islamic, we look at its history, how it started, whether it has any truth at all related to Islam or not. We are doing that because we want to unleash, we want to unveil the conspiracies and misconceptions that the world has against Islam that shouldn't be there in the first place. So we want to be your voice of sound, your voice of reason, your voice of truth. We want to bring that to your phone or whatever it is you're using to view us. But before we get on with that, we want to look at Uganda and what happened this week. On this show, we do a recap on what really happened in the political sphere of Uganda, and well, we briefly look at that and we analyze it in the drive to 2021. In studios, I'm Ashaba Ajay, I'm the host Islam Now, and we have Akampura Godfrey Council. Please say hello to the viewers.
Good afternoon, viewers.
Thank you, Akampa. It's always a pleasure having you here. Now, I wanted us to begin with the NRM. The NRM, they had very chaotic elections in Baogola North. The daughter of KUTEESA, Naivari KUTEESA Musherure, quite a number of names, was vying against the step-brother of the president, MUSEVEN, Sodo Kabuta. And the election first, then reviewing the votes and the voting, and Sodo Kabuta emerged the winner. Now, KUTEESA'S daughter was not satisfied with the result, so she referred the issue to the NRM election tribunal, the tribunal that was set up to look at the complaints from the primaries. Now, the election tribunal referred that to the SEC, the Central Executive Committee of the NRM. Yesterday, the Secretary General of the NRM, the Honorable Kasule Lumumba, she issued a statement that the SEC did not get enough time to review the complaint of Charles KUTEESA, and the conclusion was that the NRM was not going to give a nomination form to either of the candidates. So they are both coming as independent, or one of them is the one that was declared by Odo is going to come as NRM. What happens in that case?
Of course, when Odoi declared, it would mean that is the flag bearer. But when the matter was referred to the tribunal for adjudication, the result of the tribunal would have prevailed, but the tribunal also never did anything except recognizing that there were malpractices, a number of things were done, and then that the election wasn't good enough to show who is the winner. And then it referred it to the SEC, which SEC said they don't have time to look into it. But I still believe, had they looked into it and maybe said there should be a by-election, it would be as chaotic. Remember that particular election wasn't according to the timetable of other elections, NRM elections. At one point it was stopped, and then they called for it again, and then still it was chaotic. So there is no assurance. that similar things cannot happen in a by-election.
But what does that say about the NRM? Because if the election won't be enough, if the results of the election won't be respected, and then you take it to a tribunal that has been set up to particularly take care of such complaints, and they say yes, there are malpractices, and then decide nothing, what does that say about NRM and Uganda in general?
Of course, as usual, it means actually that NRM structures are not autonomous. They always have someone who casts a decisive vote, who makes the final verdict.
Yeah.
That means you can't even be sure whether these other results of the tribunal were always not influenced. We even have Nyabushozi,
Yes.
where the president decided who the flag bearer should be, even when the tribunal had not said so. So at the end of it all, they should have actually sent it to the president, and he would give them a candidate.
But now, I think you're trying to push the president to a fix. Because, anyway, what do you think it is? You think it is the power of money at play or power of both?
You see, the two candidates have it all. If it's state machinery, they all have it. Money, they all have access to money. And they are all popular in the constituency. So you can't rule out anything by anyone. You know, in some other areas, you would find someone is more connected to the state, so he bulldozes others using state machinery, like in my own constituency. But this time you find two who are all connected to the state. They all have state machinery. So all you will see is a fight of those elephants, and of course, where the grass will suffer. We saw people bleeding and others have since lost lives.
But you know, us wanting to kid ourselves that the president does not have the final say, notwithstanding, if he cannot come in as early as this, what does that mean? That depicts how much of a power that, say, KUTEESA holds in this country if the president can't stay away for this long.
Of course, the fact is, KUTEESA is one of the owners of this country. If it was a company, I would say he holds substantial shares in the company called Uganda. So you cannot just rule out his interests and just throw them in the dustbin.
Yeah, I pick an interest in that. What informs that he's one of the owners of this country?
Because he's one of the untouchables. According to the constitution, it's only the president that cannot be prosecuted. But we also see KUTEESA as one of those who can't be prosecuted. He enjoys almost equal powers and rights or immunities as the president.
Would that be because KUTEESA is connected to the state, or KUTEESA is powerful in his own person?
KUTEESA being connected to the state, say KUTEESA is the state. He's the state.
Yeah, I'm looking for what informs that, what makes him.
Yeah, he is powerful. He's one of the biggest stakeholders in the government we have today. He's one of the leading he's like the third or fourth leading stakeholder in the government we have today.
You know, I can't put what I'm trying to understand, and what I would like you to make the viewers understand is what qualifies one as a stakeholder. Is it your position as a Minister of Foreign Affairs, or do you need something more than that?
It's much more than that. Even if he wasn't having any position as MP and as a minister, he would still remain powerful. Because, I mean, he's powerful as an individual, then he again gets positions that empower him further. Yes.
Are you one of those that believe in much like a concept that when Kutua was deposited, he left all the state money to KUTEESA?
Of course, KUTEESA has been a smart man. He has been smart that you can't rule out anything. I mean, we've seen him in all the governments since the 70s. He has been in all the governments and in big positions. So you can't rule out anything. This is a man who was rich even before NRM came into power. And see, all such monies, all such deals or positions are negotiated in some dark room somewhere by the parties.
Do you see this Dustin Maugura North settling come 2021? Who do you think is going to end up in parliament, and who should anyway, and why?
Actually, you can't, it's too early to know. Even on the polling day, for those two candidates, one would say it's too early to say this is going to win. They are all popular, they all have the money, they all have the state machinery, they all can afford anything, including what is unlawful. Yes.
Well, thank you, Akapa. Now, thank you for keeping us company. We are trying to look at the events that happened in the country, Uganda, in the course of this week and break them down a bit. We shall see in a minute. We have to go for a very short break. Thank you. We are glad to have you on board today. It is Saturday, the 17th of October, 2020, and we are still looking at the events that happened in this country this week. Now, two things happened to the National Unity Platform people. There was a raid earlier this week. Some of them have been cited wearing ranks. You find someone called Shaba with a rank of a general, a colonel, and well, of course, the berets, the army has always talked about that, and of course the general dressing. That's the explanation that is given by the security agencies for raiding the NUP offices. But in the same vein, the NUP officials accused the government of going away with their millions of shillings and papers that bore signatures that were supposed to push BOBI for presidency. Now, where do you find the justification? Should no people be left to put on their berets and ranks and all, or was the police and the army justified to have a raid on their offices?
Personally, I would find no reason for the state to stop them from putting them their red berets. Because the argument that it is a military hardware, that it is, I mean, they are different. They are different from what the military puts on. And then two, the insignia, the pips that they put on as ranks and then pose around, don't necessarily make them ranks.
Yes.
And then the entire dress, that red overall, and it's not military. There is nothing military there. But of course, with politics, when you front political interests and moves, reasoning somehow ceases. You have to suppress reasoning, and that's why I would say there was no reasoning in the whole move. But well, they had earlier told them that we won't allow this. We won't allow the red berets. We won't allow the pips that you're putting on. Of course, people power guys were not ready to listen. And then, of course, on the side of the government, why you would understand it politically, is that similar things have happened. We saw a similar dress code in Germany sometime back in the pre-Second World War era.
Yes.
And then how the army rose, and then it began to pose as an army until when finally it became a force.
Yeah.
So, given the times we have in the country, I think the state has political reasons, not legal, political reasons.
Political justification?
Yes, to go for NUP and then to make sure they don't put on that attire.
But Akamba, if we allowed everyone to have the insignia on, in the first place, why would you want to put on something like that as a civilian?
And because I mean, I feel comfortable. It's a sign of identification as NUP members, actually as people power members, because not every NUP puts on that.
Do you think at the back of their minds they put on that because they want to be civilians that wear ranks, or because they look at themselves as a force that is fighting a force?
You know, as I said before, politics sometimes don't call for reasoning, because they are looking at how they can mobilize themselves, how they can motivate themselves. They keep on bringing something new that they can put on to show that they are different and they are pushing for this, and then they belong to this this side of politics.
Mm.
Yes.
Well, a day, 2 days after the raid, there was a drone sighted, according to Honorable Chaguranyi Sentamu. There was a drone sighted in Magere, around his residence. I think the first bits of information were released by Eddie Mutwe, and they were saying that the government is spying on them. Now, you think that the government of Uganda does not have the kind of where that would spy on them if there was something to spy in Magere without being noticed? Do you think that the NRM government, the security agencies, would go that low?
They already have it, and I think they can even without any gadget, they can know what is happening in and outside that house, that Magere Honorable Chaguranyi house. They have that capacity. Then they even have the capacity of using the people around Bobi Wine himself, or even the family members, or the employees.
So do you
to
think
even
it was
have all the information they need?
Do you think it was a ploy by people power?
You see, and then it goes to the same thing that I was telling you. Politics. Politicians are capable of anything. Otherwise, why would someone get a drone? A drone used to capture videos, actually videos on events. And you think you're using that as a spy gadget, as a surveillance system? Really, it can't work. Because the government is capable of getting the smallest gadget that can even get to the bedroom of Bobi Wine and then get the information extracted, the audios or even videos. Why would it then go for an event, a photograph camera of events, that is used to capture events? So
you think it was a popularity stunt?
I believe so.
Yeah. In early 80s, when the Bush was going on, the Obote government used to decry that the NRA Bush people were committing atrocities, posing like the UPC government security agents to tarnish the name, to accelerate the unpopularity of the UPC amongst the Ugandans. Do you think that Bobi is using the same trick that Museveni used against Obote, against Museveni himself?
Yeah, you see, the propaganda does a lot. And if you want to undermine a government, you start with propaganda. So they can also use it as propaganda. And by the way, you can't even rule it out that indeed rebels were doing it to make the government unpopular. Because ultimately, if they did it, it worked for them. And I believe they did it. Propaganda is one of the biggest tools in warfare.
If not the biggest tool anyway. So if one was to look at the tactics that the National Unity Platform reports that the NRM is using against them, say, if they say that you came, you raided our offices and took away papers that had 7 million signatures, but there is no evidence to show for it. At the end of the day, the courts are going to ask for evidence. You need plenty of cars to transport 7 million papers that bear signatures rather papers that bear 7 million signatures. do you find anything that is appealing in the allegations made by NUP against the government, or Ugandans are just going to realize before time, before quite what someone would term as sufficient time, that it is all bullshitting going around?
Well, one, if those signatures, all those documents bearing signatures of those who are going to, by the way, in the first place, why did he have 7 million documents bearing signatures? 7 million for what? Does he need them for nominations? If they were for nominations, he can have them back, because he can go to the same people, he signed for him. And two, were they membership signatures? If they were, then probably they have another storage. We no longer store hard copies only.
No, those were endorsement signatures for his candidature as a president. We shall be back in a few seconds. Save.
You can have them back.
for them that they should wait if they want to put up a fight against Museveni?
Definitely in Uganda, the moment you begin to challenge the status quo, or you differ from their views, you have a serious price to pay. And the more you get harder, the more the bigger the price. So they should expect even the worst. They haven't lost many lives. People lost lives in their own rallies. People lost lives demonstrating. Yeah, you remember what happened in 2011.
Yeah.
So it's just the beginning. And of course for them, they are lucky that they may not get that far. By next year, by maybe March next year, they'll have gone back to normal.
I want us to conclude on the NUP issue. With 2021, whether or not you expect Bobi Wine to get a reasonable chunk of the votes, he won't be in government. He's a member of parliament right now. But after 2021, he won't be in parliament. He won't be part of the government. What do you think happens to him between 2021 and 2026? Do you think he gains the momentum to build the party from outside, or do you see him shrinking?
One of the reasons I was saying that come March 2021, they'll all go back to their homes and chill, is simply because they won't have a platform. Apparently he's an MP, that's a platform. Everywhere, even around the world, he can speak as an MP of the parliament, part of the government. Even in his constituency, he has the right to gather people and then he speaks to them.
Yes.
By March 2021, he won't be an MP, he won't be a minister, he won't be a president. So there, the government will even have grounds to crush him completely. So to the extent that even if he gathers 3 or 4 people, they can easily charge him for gathering them for holding an illegal assembly or anything like that under the Public Order Management Act.
Yes.
So he won't have the freedom he has, the limited freedom he has. Of course, he doesn't have even freedom today. He won't have even that limited freedom to speak to the public, to speak to Ugandans. So that will be his end. He won't even build that particular product.
We wait for post-Feb 2021 to see what becomes of the National Unity Platform Party. Now, I want us to look at the harm case. It's been selling like hot cake in the papers. I saw an article in Bloomberg, I saw another one in Reuters. They were talking about this particular ruling and outsourcing company as far as the banking is concerned. Now, looking at Ham's petition, he says that they debited his account without his knowledge, and he says they debited his account unjustly and illegally without his consent and knowledge. Then he questions the manner in which the Diamond Trust Bank of Kenya operated in Uganda without the knowledge of the central banks of both Kenya and Uganda. And then he accuses the Diamond Trust Bank Uganda of aiding, abetting, and working with the Diamond Trust Bank of Kenya without, of course, the authorization of both countries, both central banks, from the both of Uganda and Kenya. And he insists that they did not have a license to carry on financial transactions in that land, in Uganda, because they didn't have such authorization. I mean, if you look at it broadly, it would mean that URA is supposed to question why they never received taxes from the big bids. And of course, the central banks of Uganda and Kenya are supposed to question how it came to that level, that a bank in Uganda can outsource from a bank in Kenya. And there is no such knowledge. What's your view? Who is at fault at law?
Bank of Uganda has supervisory powers over all financial institutions in Uganda. To the extent that even when it lends to them or it gets to the extent of controlling the interest rates, somehow an individual company gets a loan from a Kenyan bank using a Ugandan bank. There was a lot anyway. All I can say is there was a lot that was illegal that rendered the entire contract a an illegal contract.
Yes.
And therefore, they couldn't recover under that contract, but maybe using other avenues, but not under the contract, that loan facility contract.
But as I understand, the recovery was made under that particular contract.
That's why actually now the recovery becomes illegal, and all the monies that they had taken off their accounts of harm enterprises will be recoverable as good. Actually, that's why court would come and say, refund the man's money. It was taken legally.
But let me create this very actual hypothesis. So you are harmed, and you know how the financial world works. You come to my bank and you ask for a loan facility, which I extend to you. But you know that as DTB, I do not have such capacity to raise such money. So you know that I'm going to outsource, which I do. I extend that loan facility to you. Then at some point you get some bit of legal knowledge that what I did was not sanctioned by the financial board. Yes, of Uganda. And you try to exploit that, but you had the knowledge, considering your experience in the business world, you had the knowledge that I did not have such capacity to raise such money. So you participated in the contract well knowing that as outsourcing. Now, whether you found out later that that was illegal technically is notwithstanding, because ignorance of the law is no defense. So that makes it an illegality, the whole contract, right?
Yes.
Shouldn't both parties go to where they were before the initial transaction happened?
Well, the question would be, did Diamond Trust Bank seek to go back to where they were before the contract? If it sought that, then it ought to have put a counterclaim saying, okay, bring back my money that you took. Not the loan. It can now be a recovery of the money, of the loan. It would now be bring back the money that you took. So at that point, one would say, and you said that Ham knew, don't you think Diamond Trust Bank has lawyers who are even more experienced than Ham? Both Diamond Trust Bank Kenya and Diamond Trust Uganda. They have a legal team that is more robust than Ham and Ham Enterprises can ever have or ever hire.
Yeah, what informs that opinion? Because I mean, the lawyer of Ham is Fred Mwema. So for some reason, you're either underestimating the legal capacity of Fred Mwema or something worse.
Fred Mwema came in during the recoveries.
Yes.
And even if he was a full-time lawyer, he's not always on how
Yes.
And he's here. He has other businesses. So the whole thing is Diamond Trust Bank, Kenya and Uganda have better legal personnel and legal department than Ham can ever hire.
Yes.
So it can't be that Ham used their lack of knowledge to get a loan from them and turn around, or that Ham knew he's entering into an illegal contract, so that he later turns around and says you can't recover your money. It can't really be like that. They ought to know. And if they
No,
don't know,
where my focus is that Ham needed money, but DTB, his bank, could not extend the money. They needed to outsource. Now, DTB knew that there is something, there is a space, there is a loophole they can take care of, they can use to outsource, minus informing the central bank. And Ham had the same knowledge. Haven't you thought of that? That they both agreed to do this, minus involving other stakeholders that would have made the transaction more expensive.
yes. Now, if they all participated in an illegality, would that give any of the parties leverage over the other? The answer, of course, would be no. The whole contract remains illegal and unenforceable.
Yeah.
It's like saying I contract you to go and murder someone, and then finally I don't pay you your balance, or even don't pay the entire consideration. And then you say, after all, we all agreed that we go and murder him, I helped you to get rid of him, and now turning around, you don't want to pay me,
Which court will enforce such a contract? Of course, no court will do that.
Yeah, which is where my questioning is. Why is court finding someone at fault and not the other? Is it because one took the other one to court? Are we supposed to be having this case finding one at fault and one in right to
Of course,
begin
in the
with?
first place, who sued? Who went to court? Who cried to court for help? So he's the one who sought remedies.
Yes.
And when court realized that indeed the contract was illegal, it would say, okay, you took his money illegally, refund it.
But now, Akampa, what does that say about Uganda and her position in the global financial economy?
It really, I mean, it has nothing to do with it. If I have my law, you have your laws. I mean, this it's a sovereign state, Uganda.
Is it though?
We have our laws, and that govern us here. So you can't try to, and in any case, Diamond Trust Bank Uganda had an opportunity of getting the money as Diamond Trust Bank. It lends it to harm as Diamond Trust Bank Uganda. And then they recover it normally, like they always give us loans. They always give him loans. Why would they wait that make Ham sign a contract with Kenya, with Diamond Trust Bank Kenya, which doesn't have a license in Uganda? It's not registered in Uganda.
And doesn't do any financial institution related businesses in Uganda. I mean, you see the whole arrangement and realize that the banks, these two banks, were at home.
But what does that speak of the Central Bank of Uganda? Were they caught sleeping at their own jobs?
Of course, you know, those transactions, I don't think they have surveillance systems or they have everything recording whatever transaction happens, much as they ought to have, they ought to detect that. That shows you that actually these are individually this is what mandate harms against states. That shows that Bank of Uganda has issues. It's also another institution, Uganda institution, other institution. Of course, it's not a law, many others also.
The slowly by slowly degenerating. We've seen even Bank of Uganda having many other scandals after scandals within itself.
Yes.
Now, if it can't organize its own house, how do you think it will organize those it supervise? No wonder it's happening.
Well, as we conclude on this matter, what do you think should happen? If you were to look at the matter standing aside, what should have happened? What is the right thing to happen in the legal aspect?
In regard to this?
Yes, to the transaction, the harm case. Should it be
I believe Diamond Trust Bank Kenya and Diamond Trust Bank Uganda can recover this money, not as a loan, because there was no loan at all. Whatever agreements they executed were illegal. So they can recover that money under the principle of money had and received. Because I mean, harm cannot be allowed to unjustly enrich himself. That is unjust enrichment, which the law can't allow. But of course, they can recover that in that aspect. Because they must have, of course, deposited it on his account, and then they can turn around and say, okay, what we deposited on your account should be now given to us. Of course, that would mean they ought to have also put in a counterclaim under that principle and say, okay, well, whatever happened, and we also have this claim. We deposited this amount of money in his bank, and we also need it on his bank account. Also need it.
But in all other legal bearings, this is a precedent. Whatever happens in this case is going to create a precedent for Uganda. And where we are is that someone is going to be found at fault, someone is going to be entitled to something. What keeps Ugandans and Uganda safe? Is it harm taking the judgment or DTB?
The fact is, the law is as it is, not as it ought to. Actually, even the law we have is clear. You cannot do financial institution-related businesses without a license.
Yes.
Here is DTB Kenya purporting to do that business without a license. That makes the transaction illegal.
Yes.
Now, it leaves Uganda where it has been. It's only a tip to banks. Always try to do a lot in line. I mean, to do whatever you're doing in line with the law.
Very many people expect their peer to go the other side. So let's wait. We shall focus on that when that happens. Now we want to look at the core of this program, but to do that we shall need a very short break of seconds. So thank you for sticking by. Thank you for sticking with us. The show is Islam. Now we look at the truth about Islam. Now the political hot contests notwithstanding, this show is supposed to show us the truth that exists in the world, political events and what they have to do with Islam, if there is something at all or not. And in the subsequent weeks, we shall be looking at countries, a country that has had an event. We look at it in its modern times and the population and where it sits and the capital and the leader and what is happening there, if it has its origins in Islam or if it does not. Now we shall be looking at the first country that we are looking at is Afghanistan, but we shall be looking at Afghanistan in general because Afghanistan has been well in a mess since 1988. So starting with next week, we shall be looking at Afghanistan and the creation of Al-Qaeda and the existence of the Taliban and the consequent creation of a deal with America that is supposed to take their troops out. We shall look at the events that have been happening in these decades, and they have been given a bearing. They have been named after Islam, and we shall be breaking that down to see if it's truth or if it is a misconception, if it is something we just don't know about Islam. But we shall do that next week. For now, let's say bye to people that have been keeping us company.
Thank you for watching us. Have a nice week, everybody.
Yeah, it's always nice catching up with you. And just like I just said, we are discussing Afghanistan. It would be very much nice if you do what we normally discuss on that, what we normally discuss at the end of this show. Research, find out something about Afghanistan. So next week when we are discussing, we are on the same page. Thank you for keeping us company. I'm always grateful for that. Have a nice day. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.